So we are on the 12.4 worksheet number 2, our second day factoring these trinomials. So at this point we should have the hang of it. We're going to look at the third term in these trinomials and think of factors, and then we're going to look at those factors and try and get them to add up or have a sum of this middle term. So with 9 I think 3 and 3 first, but that's never going to get me a 10. And then I notice that this is positive. They multiply to a positive, but they're adding to a negative. That means it's going to be two negatives. And the only other factors of 9 besides 3 and 3, whole number factors, are 9 and 1. And if I make them both negative, they will add up to negative 10. So it is going to be a negative 9 and a negative 1. And remember, you can put that in any order. If you wanted to do n minus 1 and minus 9, that's fine. But they both must be negative. Number 2, multiply to 100, add up to 20 somehow. Again, we're sitting here looking at a positive product in a negative sum. So they're both going to be negative. So at first I thought 25 and 4, because 25 and 4 gets you close. Obviously not right on the dot though, so that's not the right answer. And so then I'm thinking 50 and 2. But when they both have to be negative, they're going to have to add up to this. I realize that it's 10 times 10. So it's two negative 10s. They will multiply to positive 100, they will add to negative 20. You could also rewrite this, since it's times the same thing, as squared. Number 3, same thing. We got a positive product, a negative sum. So I know it's two negatives adding up to that. So 10 and 3, nope. 15 and 2, nope. 6 and 5, they will add up to 11. Negative 6, negative 5, multiplied together give you positive 30. Okay, 24. You've got 12 and 2, that's not going to work. You've got 6 and 4, that's not going to work. 24 and 1, clearly not. So it's 8 and 3, again a positive product, so two negative numbers because we know they're adding up to a negative. So it's negative 8, negative 3. They add up to negative 11, they multiply to 24. And remember, you can always double check these and redistribute. So real quick, let's do that. N times n is n squared. N times negative 3, negative 3n. Negative 8 times n is negative 8n. And then negative 8 times negative 3 is positive 24. The negative 3 and the negative 8 combine to make a negative 11n. We got back to where we started, so we know our answer is right. So you can always double check. Number 5, now we've got positives. All positives, which means we're only dealing with positives. They're multiplying to 4 and adding up to 5, that's 4 and 1. Now I've got two negatives here, which means only one is going to be negative. Because if they're multiplying to a negative, they both can't be negative. So 32, I'm thinking 8 and 4, and that'll work to get us here. Now since this is negative, I need to put the bigger of the two numbers with the negative. So that'd be the 8, and then the 4 is positive, because negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. If I flip-flopped it and put the 4 with the negative and the 8 with the positive, I'd end up with a positive 4. So since I want it to be negative, I put the bigger number with the negative. Number 7. Again, a positive product and a negative sum. So these are both negative. So it's not 6 and 1. It's going to have to be 3 and 2. Two positives means all positive. Multiplying to 9, adding up to 6, that's 3 and 3. And since that's the same thing times itself, you could rewrite it as squared. Okay, now this one, excuse me, we're missing that middle term, which means the numbers are going to add up to something that cancels out. So it's 0. So we still can go through the same process here. It's going to be a negative product, which means one's plus, one's minus. And when you add them together, it eliminates the middle term, meaning it's 0. So I need numbers that multiply to 49, one positive, one negative. And when you add them together, you get 0. Well, the only numbers that you get 0 when you add them together are opposites. 49, you should already be thinking 7 times 7, so this should make sense. You'll end up with a negative 7 and a positive 7. They will cancel, and then just leave you with the p squared and the minus 49. Okay, number 10. Multiplying to a positive, adding to a negative. That's two negatives. 80 would be 8 and 10. 11. Multiplying to a negative. So one's negative, one's positive. 70, I would think 10 and 7 first, and I can make a 10 and a 7 into a negative 3. So since it's a negative sum, I'm going to put the bigger number with the negatives. So 10 and 7 multiplied to negative 70, add up to negative 3. Positive product, a negative sum. That's two negatives. And since it's 13, the only numbers that multiply to 13 whole numbers wise is 13 and 1. 21, I think 7 and 3, and it's negative. So one's negative, one's positive if they're multiplying to a negative. And then when they add up to a negative, I got to put the bigger number with the negatives. So 7 and 3. 14. I've got 48 here. So I think 12 and 4, not going to get me here though. They're going to have to be numbers that are closer together. So 8 and 6. One's negative, one's positive if they're multiplying to a negative, and they're adding to a negative, so the bigger one goes to the negatives, 8 and 6. 48 again. 8 and 6 can make 14, and since they're multiplying to a positive and adding to a negative, I know they're both negative. So 8 and 6, two negatives will add up to the negative 14. 60, I think 10 and 6. I can make a 4 with 10 and 6. They're multiplying to a negative, so one of them's positive. And since they add up to a positive, I'm going to put the bigger number with the positives. So positive 10, negative 6, multiply to negative 60, add up to positive 4. 17. Looks very similar, I was just thinking, except we have no negatives here, all positives. But 48 is still 8 and 6. If they're both positive, they'll add up to a positive 14. So it's 8 and 6. 18. 6 and 6 make 36, but that's not going to get me to 15. 12 and 3, all positives. So it is plus 12 plus 3, multiplies to 36, adds up to 15. 84 is a tough one, right? That's not one that just comes to mind necessarily. Okay, so you're going to have to kind of try some different things out here. It ends up being 14 and 6 that multiply to 84. We know one's negative, one's positive, and the bigger of the two is going to have to be the negative. So 14 and 6, they multiply to negative 84. They're going to add up to negative 8. All right, and then the last one, 64, I think 8 and 8, it's all positives. They're going to add up to 16, so we're good. X plus 8, multiply to positive 64, add up to 16. Since it's the same thing times itself, you can write it like this. Okay, to the back now. We're going to solve these two ways. Once by factoring, which is the fast way, and then once by the quadratic formula, which takes longer. But we want to be able to convince ourselves that they're both going to work here. So let's start by factoring. 28. You've got 7 and 4 to make 28. You've got 14 and 2, but 7 and 4 can make a 3. It's negative, so one of them's negative. One of them's positive. It's going to equal 0 still. Since we're adding up to a positive, I need the bigger 7 to go with the positive. Double check it. They multiply to negative 28. They add up to positive 3. Now we have to think, what numbers would we plug in to make this equation true? So for it to be true, either one of these quantities, which have binomials inside of them, have to equal 0. So this times this equals 0. So the number you would plug in here would be positive 4 to make this 0, 4 minus 4, and negative 7 to make that one true. So kind of the opposite of the factors we chose. So now we're going to use quadratic formula to prove that this works. And eventually when we can factor, we will abandon quadratic formula and just solve by factoring because it's easier and faster. Okay, so you go back to the original. A is 1, B is 3, C is negative 28. So negative B is negative 3. B squared, 3 squared, is 9, minus 4 times 1 times negative 28, all over 2 times 1, which is just 2. So let's grab the calculator. 9 minus 4 times 1 times negative 28 is 121. Take the square root of 121, and it's 11. So it's negative 3 plus or minus 11 over 2. Split it into 2 pieces. This is going to be 8 over 2, which is 4. Negative 3 minus 11 over 3, that's negative 14. Oops, over 2. And I get negative 7. And so 4, negative 7 matches what I got. You should get the same answer both ways. Okay, 22, factoring this, that's 4 and 1 to make a 5. X plus 1, x plus 4. Multiply to positive 4, add up to 5. So to make this equal to 0, x must be a negative 1, x must be negative 4. You see how easy that is when you can factor. We don't have to go through this whole long process. But plugging in a equals 1, b equals 5, c equals 4. So negative b would be negative 5. B squared would be 25, 5 squared, minus 4 times 1 times 4. Over 2 times a, 2 times 1, which is just 2. So 25 minus 4 times 1 times 4 is 9. Square root of 9 is 3. Oops. Square root of 9 is 3. So this whole top part becomes 3. So negative 5 plus or minus 3 over 2. So negative 5 plus 3 over 2. That's negative 2 over 2. That's negative 1. Negative 5 minus 3 over 2. That's negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So it matches. Okay, 23. These we can't do anything with until this is a 0. So one quick little step, minus 3. Make this equal to 0. This all comes down. The 3 only interacts with a like term, which is the 19. So we get 16. Now we can factor it. It's all positives. So we're going to have positives here. 16, that's 8 and 2. Could be 4 and 4, right? But that doesn't add up to 10. So it's 8 and 2. So to make this a 0, x would equal negative 8. To make this a 0, it would be a negative 2. Quadratic formula, negative b. So let's go back. This is where you pull it from. Make sure you don't go back to here. You have to pull a, b, and c from here. So a is 1, b is 10, c is 16. So negative b is negative 10, plus or minus b squared, so 100, minus 4 times 1 times 16, over 2 times 1, so 2. Oops. 4 times 1 times 16. You get 36. Square root of 36 is 6. So it's negative 10 plus or minus 6 over 2. So we're going to get negative 4 over 2. That's negative 2. And then when we minus the 6, we're going to get negative 16 over 2, which is your negative 8. Okay, last one. Add the 7 to create the 0. That'll be a 30. So b squared plus 11b plus 30. All positives. So it's b plus and b plus. Multiplying to 30, adding up to 11. That's not 10 and 3. It's not 15 and 2. It's 6 and 5. So to make these equal to 0, b must be negative 6. B must be negative 5. And one more time with quadratic formula. Going back to here, a is 1, b is 11, and c is 30. So negative b is negative 11 plus or minus. B squared, 11 squared plug in your calculator, is 121 minus 4 times 1 times 30 over 2 times 1, which is 2. So in your calculator, 121 minus 4 times 1 times 30 is 1, and square root of 1 is just 1. So it's negative 11 plus or minus 1 over 2. So that's negative 10 over 2, which is our negative 5. And when we minus it, we get negative 12 over 2, which is negative 6. They match, and we're good.